Today we're going to discuss how our body maintains homeostasis in the presence of microorganisms. For a second, I'd like you to write down your own thoughts. How do you think microorganisms might challenge homeostasis in the body? Pause the recording and press play when you're done. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like you to share with your partner some of your ideas about how microorganisms challenge homeostasis in the body. Pause the recording and press play when you're done. My guess is that you talked about microorganisms as little things. That might include bacteria, protists. You might have talked about viruses, or fungi, or microscopic plants or animals. So the question is, do all of these microorganisms challenge homeostasis? Take a second and jot down some notes. Pause me and press play when you're finished. The answer to this question is, it depends. There are some microorganisms, which we call pathogens, that can be harmful. One example of this is Yersinia pestis. This, we think, may have caused the Black Plague. Additionally, the AIDS virus and malaria, which is caused by a protozoa. All of those are caused by small microorganisms that are harmful to the body. There are also microorganisms that can be helpful. In your human body alone, you have 10 times as many microorganisms in your intestines that are actually, and throughout the rest of your body, that are actually than cells in your own body. So tons more microorganisms than actual cells. A lot of these are helpful. These include bacteria, fungi, and protozoans. Specifically, there's a bacteria that produces vitamin K that's necessary for our body. Some bacteria that do challenge, are the ones we're going to kind of focus on a little bit. First of all, you need to understand that bacteria are prokaryotes. These are unicellular or single-celled organisms that don't have a nucleus and they don't have other membrane-bound organelles. Now, when it comes down to classification, genetics really changed this. In the mid-1970s, we had this huge increase where we were comparing genes as the primary factor for classification instead of other things. And when genetic similarity was stressed instead of outward behavior and appearances, the way we organized organisms switched up. So they took what used to be called Kingdom Monera and broke it apart into Eubacteria and Archaeobacteria. The reason they did this is because they discovered these two groups of bacteria are so different from each other that either group is more similar to humans or eukaryotes as they are with each other. Now, Archaeobacteria we call the extremists. They live in extreme habitats. These include those that don't have a lot of free oxygen, places with lots of concentrations of salt, like the salted flesh of fish that are being sold in a market. Hot acidic waters near deep sea vents. These are where we'll find the Archaeobacteria. The Eubacteria are maybe more the bacteria that you think about. They live in more hospitable places. They can live on the surface of your skin. Heterotrophic bacteria can live almost everywhere. They're like us. They have to get their food elsewhere. But there are also autotrophic bacteria that get their energy through the process of photosynthesis. And then there's chemosynthetic bacteria that instead of using carbon dioxide and sunlight to get their energy, they actually use inorganic compounds with sulfur and nitrogen. When it comes to organizing these bacteria, it's important to remember that organizing organisms or classification is a human construct, so it's always changing. And we know as of April 2010, there was no set of kingdoms that everybody could agree on. So it's still a way that we organize organisms, and so you should sort of know about Archaeobacteria and Eubacteria, but you should also recognize that ideas about how we separate these groups of bacteria are constantly changing. There are some things in terms of structurally about bacteria that I would like you to know. Let's take a second and look here at your cell wall. This is this outer layer that gives shape and support. Go one layer in and you've got your cell membrane. Then you've got your chromosome, which you'll see it's right in the middle. Remember, they don't have a nucleus. And you've got your flagellum, which is like a whip-like piece that allows some bacteria to move if they've got a flagellum. And then there's the pilus. Now, these are tiny little hairs that can attach to another piece of bacteria and allow them to exchange DNA. Another piece that we've talked about already is the plasmid, a piece of circular DNA with just a couple genes in it. I want you to take a second and draw that plasmid in. So you remember that plasmid might just have a couple genes on it. We talked about these a lot in our biotech unit, and we used plasmids sometimes for genetic recombination experiments. So how do bacteria reproduce? First of all, they reproduce asexually through mitosis or binary fission. They make an identical copy of themselves and split in two. But that doesn't give them the kind of variety that we are used to with sexual reproduction. So they have this other method called conjugation, where their pilus extend and attach to another bacteria and allow the plasmids to pass back and forth. And this allows asexual bacteria to get a little bit more variety. But if we return back to our original question about exactly how bacteria challenge homeostasis, the one thing I want you to recognize is that they do it in lots of different ways because there's lots of kinds of bacteria. One type invades and destroys cells. So the bacterium that causes tuberculosis will actually destroy your white blood cells by engulfing them. There are other groups of bacteria that produce poisons. The bacteria that causes botulism or food poisoning actually secretes a really toxic protein. Salmonella has components in its cell wall. Those are actually what makes you sick with food poisoning, for those of you who like to eat raw cookie dough. Now, we need to also make sure you understand that not all bacteria are harmful. Most bacteria are either harmless or helpful. Some E. coli make vitamin K, and we talked about that earlier, and there's the B complex vitamins in our body, but not all E. coli are good. There's these other E. coli that actually make us have diarrhea. We also have nitrogen-fixing bacteria that we're going to spend some time talking about in our ecology unit that are crucial to helping working with plants to get them the nitrogen they need, and then we eat those plants to get the nitrogen in a form that we need. I'm sure you guys have heard about probiotics, and there are probiotics in which are good bacteria, like lactobacillus, that are in some yogurts, and that can be helpful when we're fighting we're fighting other kinds of infections, sometimes caused by different bacteria. Now, how do we defend against the bacterial infections that are harmful? Well, the best thing you can do is pay attention to hygiene. Really do a nice job washing your hands consistently. We have some natural protective barriers like the skin and the mucus in our nose that help our body keep some of that bacteria out. We also have a chemical defense, which is our immune system that attacks some of these bacteria. We also have some new technology, such as vaccines and antibiotics. So many of our antibiotics that we take today for bacterial infections work by damaging or preventing the formation of the cell wall. So what happens is if that bacteria is going around your body and it gets a little crack, normally those bacteria can heal themselves. But in the presence of these antibiotics, those little cracks cannot be healed and water rushes in, causing the bacteria to explode. So at this point in time, I would like you to take a second and do a concept check. Think about all the questions I've listed there on your Big Ideas packet. Pause me, and when you're done, you can see the answers to your questions. Okay. Hopefully, when you went through your concept check, you remembered a couple things, like that the bacterial structure that's attacked by antibiotics is the cell wall. And if you wanted to cut back on bacterial infection, you should wash your hands and be careful about the way that you prepare food. You might have also listed that the body helps maintain homeostasis with things like protective barriers like your skin and your mucus and its immune system. And health officials are concerned about the overuse of antibiotics because over time that could lead to antibiotic resistance. And again, we discussed that in our evolution unit.